Hello, everyone. I'm Jim Garrison, and I want to welcome you to our monthly community call for those of us who go every year to Chartres, to the cathedral, and to that sacred site known for thousands of years as a particular place where the divine feminine has a particularly potent presence that has transformed lives as they do ours every year. We are having our call a little bit early this month because Karen Rivers, the director of the Chartres Academy, the new Chartres Academy, is leaving tomorrow on another pilgrimage for 18 days in Bali. And we're hopeful that she can say something about it before the end of the call. So as we did last month, we're going to have a conversation this time on fractals with Jain and Michael Rice. And we're going to start, as we always do, with an invocation. Pila Colorado, who normally gives us the invocation and then the benediction at the end, had to deal with a family emergency. So Karen's going to give us the invocation, and then Banafshe Sayad will give us the closing at the end. So Karen, why don't you give us our opening invocation?
Thank you, Jim. Thank you. So I'd just like to invite everyone to, if you've been to Chartres, to turn your thoughts to the beautiful hill upon which the cathedral stands. And if you haven't been to Chartres, you can draw an imagination in your mind of this sacred hill in France that's southwest of Paris. And upon it is this grand Gothic cathedral, which we'll be visiting in July again. And as we turn our thoughts to this sacred site and recall the history of the Carnutes, the Druids, and all the various stages of the building and destruction and rebuilding and destruction and rebuilding of the cathedral, we hold in our hearts the creative forces that live behind the hill, the human being, the architecture of this glorious sacred space, and Geometrica, the sacred architect, the forms that stream forth as the formative forces in all of nature, in all of creation. We see the sacred geometry in the preciousness of the flowers, in the honeycomb, in the stars, in the clouds. We see the sacred forms in the mineral kingdom with the crystals and the basalt formations and various other minerals. We see sacred geometry living in the cells of the human being and of all animals and plant life. And as we open our hearts to the profound formation that we are a part of and the formative forces that stream through the cosmos, we ask for illumination in our minds. We ask for insight into how we, through an understanding of geometry, can come to clarity in our deeds toward creating harmony in the world, creating peace, creating environmental longevity, that we can, through our understanding of these sacred forms, become ever greater stewards of the earth and of human culture. And we call on the Black Madonna, Our Lady of the Pillar, and the Virgo Paratura in the crypt to inspire us. That the Black Madonna be a guide for us, that we're coming to honor her and to visit her house and the house of Mary that Chartres Cathedral stands as. So on this call and in our daily lives, may we reflect on the sacred formation of creation and how it is such a deep part of our existence. So be it.
Thank you, Karen. We are going to discuss today the extraordinary mystery and profundity of fractals. And I want to really acknowledge Bonafche's artistry in the constant contact communications that you've been sending out, Bonafche, about this call. The images of fractals have been just spectacular. I think especially the one that was sent out this morning. So I just want to acknowledge the beauty of fractals. And as I was doing a bit of research on fractals, I was surprised that the term fractal is actually very new. It was only coined in 1975 by a mathematician called Benoit Mendelbrot. And it comes from the Latin meaning broken or fractured. And yet when you look at a fractal, it's anything but broken or fractured. And so we're going to be exploring fractals briefly, really, today, because the call will last less than an hour with Jain and Michael. And then we'll have comments by Kaylin, who knows a lot about fractals as well, and Karen will comment, and Bonafche, and we're hopeful that the students will also engage. I also want to say that I'm in Northern California in a little office where we're having our doctoral writing and research methods course, and my internet is pretty unstable. So if I get dropped off the cyber cliff here, Karen will carry on, and we'll keep the continuity of the call. But I just wanted to say that early in case anyone has difficulties hearing me or seeing me as we proceed. So why don't we start with Jain and Michael by just giving us a sense of the definition of a fractal. And then Jane's got about a 10-minute PowerPoint that we're going to show on fractals. Then we'll carry on the discussion from there. But first, Michael, why don't we start with you? How would you define a fractal? What is a fractal?
So to me, a fractal is a form, a pattern, a shape that is able to hold its symmetry regardless of the scale. So very similar to, in the information about this talk, the Matryoshka or the Russian dolls, one nested inside another. So the same shape is able to express itself at every different scale. And this property of nature affords the possibility of communication across scales. So the very small can communicate with the very large, and vice versa, using morphic resonance, morphic meaning shape, and resonance meaning singing the same song. So that shapes and patterns can communicate and connect and hold everything together because of the fact that they're the same shape across scales. That's perhaps more longer-winded than I would like to say, but that's my understanding.
Jain, how would you define fractals?
Now that was an excellent description. Thank you, Michael. The best definition that I have comes from Dan Winter, and it's quite a interesting topic because we're talking here about the mathematics of infinity, which to most people is a very abstract concept. But in this, this age of advancing technology and quantum physics, we're starting to understand the infinitely large and the infinitely small. So we need to somehow get a handle on what this infinity is, which we don't know. But I guess what comes up, a key word would be repeatability, something that repeats. And as Michael said, we're interested in the language of shape and form. So when something makes a copy of itself, that's what we would call self-similar. So self-similarity is one of the keys to understand the mathematics of infinity. And what I mean by that, there's a particular shape. I'll give you an example of perhaps the most fractal shape that I know of. If you can see here on the screen, there's the shadow of this looks like a hexagon, but this form was actually made from the number 13. So there's one, imagine like a golf ball in the middle. There's actually 12 other golf balls or spheres that pack or nest around the central sphere. So it's called the Cuboctahedron. And to show you where this shape comes from, if I had a cube, this is just a cube, and I sliced the 8 corners off the basic cube, something would happen if I could open this shape up. We want to look on the inside. If I can open this shape up, it sort of opens up. This is root 5 geometry, which is part of the golden ratio. I keep turning it around, and then suddenly I've morphed the cube into the 12 around the 1. So that these are exactly the same shape. So this is a solid shape, and that's the wireframe. Now, the reason why I'm interested in this shape, because it's the only shape I know where the inside, I'm touching one of the internal radial vectors. So the radius, that line that I'm touching there, the vector, is the same shape as the outside. So where I'm holding it here, if that's like a matchstick, that matchstick length is identical to the inside. And there's no other shape in the world that can do that. If we picked up another shape, say like a cube, it's not really fractal because the distance from the center to a vertice from the corner is a bit shorter than the edge. So that's a clue. That clue is a shape to understanding fractality. So when we understand fractal, it means we can travel infinitely large and infinitely small. So here's the same shape. This is the same shape, the 12 around the 1. And because it's fractal, because the inside is the same as the outside, that when I squeeze it, as I compress this shape, it makes the 5 platonic solids. So you just witnessed something that's called, we've got to give it a name, that was called shape-shifting. So because the inside's the same as the outside, the wavelengths piggyback non-destructively with each other. So that's the beginning point where to start. And that's why we need shape to comprehend this.
Beautiful, beautiful. Thank you. Why don't we just move forward directly into your PowerPoint, Jane, and then I'll circle back to you, Michael, and then we'll open it up to first Kaylin, then Karen, if you want to make any comment, and then to the others on the call. So Jane, why don't you take us through your PowerPoint?
Okay, so just quickly, okay, once I go through the PowerPoint, I won't have the model, so I'll just quickly show you some important shapes. If we have here, I want to explain what a stellation is. If we have here another 5 platonic solid, this has got 20 triangles. It's called a stellation. It's one of the 5 platonic solids, but when we stellate it, we take every triangle and we increase the triangle not to the same size. If this side is 1, we have to stellate to another point out here at the golden ratio 1.618. So when we stellate this shape, we end up with this shape. So it's still the same icosahedron, but we've expanded the scale at the golden ratio. And then when we join, say these 5 points here that I'm touching, it shape shifts and makes another shape. We went from 20 triangles, then we went to this shape here. Now we've got a bigger shape called the dodecahedron. I'm going to show this in the PowerPoint. And if we stellate this again, if we take this pentagon, the 5, stellated at the golden ratio, which is 1.618, we end up with a stellated dodeca. And what that makes, when you join those 12 points, you end up with a bigger version of this. So we've gone from the small to the large because the wavelength was correct. And the ultimate shape that I know, there's only one shape. So the problem here, this is called the icosa dodeca. It's an infinite geometric series. The problem here is that it makes a copy of it. Each one makes another shape. But I'm going to show you in the PowerPoint, there's another shape that makes itself. So I'll switch on to share screen. I'm just going to go through. This is the one that Michael was talking about, this doll, the Russian doll. And the beautiful thing here is that fractal is just giving birth to a baby, really. Just the most simplest definition I have is to make a copy of yourself so you can take your DNA into the future so we can survive. And that's what I mean by the mathematics of infinity. We want to preserve our memory. So a fractal does that by making a self-similar copy of itself, but the mother making a baby. So that's the simplest one. This is this looks like a forest, but it's actually the veins, the venous and arterial system of a child's kidneys. The mathematics of the pentacle, which we explored last year at Chartres, is the pentacle reduces within itself at the rate of 0.618. So if you kept drawing the pentacle within the pentacle, that's fractal. Perhaps this is one of our best images we have of fractality. It goes infinitely large and infinitely small. And that's why we're interested in the dodecahedron. That's just a fanciful image of a fractal hand where the same image continues at a smaller scale. So this here is the cube within a cube. So this is called Metatron cube, where what hasn't been understood here is where is the golden ratio when we put the small cube within the large cube. And this is quite a fascinating study because something's shape-shifting, nothing's been destroyed, and the integrity of the form is remained. So we're going to explore this in July. This is another version of the same thing. And it's kind of a mystery to us. We actually can't really explain this, but I believe this was the language of the archangels. And you can explore all the mathematics of it. Dan Winter has an excellent rendition of the origin of the love heart. When you put 2 5 spirals, when you nest 2 5 spirals together where the centers of each golden spiral intercepts itself, we end up with the golden, the love heart symbol. So I think it's going to repeat that. We'll go through that again. So this is just 2 golden spirals, and we see that the heart is within itself at infinite scale, infinitely small, infinitely large. So that's quite a fascinating exploration into the geometric understanding of infinity. So it's about falling in love, perhaps. So here's a 24 code, which comes from the Fibonacci sequence. These numbers repeat every 24 numbers to infinity. And they give us a really important clue. I'm going to talk about this in July, but the Fibonacci sequence, this 1.618 ratio that I'm very interested in, has an infinite repeating pattern. And it all adds up to the number 108. It's why a billion people worship this frequency called 108, but they don't know why. And it's based on the mathematics of flowers and the human body. Now, this is perhaps the key to this quick lecture. Is the only shape in the universe that makes a copy of itself is the tetrahedron. This is as simple. This is the first volume in space. And as you know, the triangle is the first shape in space. So in the 3D, the tetrahedron, which is a shape, say, of a buckwheat seed, or even when we sit and meditate, as you know, the terminology, what Michael was talking about, the form, we are a tetrahedral construct when we look at it in this kind of posture. So what I'm interested in as a mathematician is that what is the volume of the small tetrahedron inside the larger tetrahedron? And first of all, to get the smaller inverted tetrahedron, we're taking the midpoint or the center of the 4 faces. So when we have a triangle, when we have a tetrahedron, if we have a tetrahedron, I'm interested at where is the center of that face, which is this point there. So when we join those 4 face centers, we have a self-similar fractal copy of a form, and this doesn't exist anywhere else. And I'm interested why not many people are talking about this. Everyone's talking about squaring the circle, but why aren't we, say, triangling the circle? Why aren't we looking at the ratio of a tetrahedron to the sphere? Everyone's obsessed about the cube and the sphere having equal volumes, equal areas, but this is actually the starting point. But what I'm fascinated by, and I only just discovered this after 30 years, is the volume of the inside little tetrahedron is 1/27th. It fits into the bigger tetrahedron 27 times, and that number was very sacred to Pythagoras. 27 has got a lot to do with the circadian rhythms, the ley lines. It's a cosmic math. We don't really live in 24 hours in the day. The cosmic time is based on 27 hours in a day. So this is a geometrical construct that shows us that the inside fits into the bigger one 27 times. And this is such exciting research, and I'm going to expand on that in July. I won't go into, this is what you'll see in fractal books, how to subdivide space, which is quite fascinating. So we'll call it self-dual. And so, but the other shapes are interesting too. When you look at the cube, what's the shape inside the cube? If we look at all the face centers, so we have an octahedron. And then if you went inside the octahedron and joined the the centers of the faces, you end up with the cube. So it goes octacube forever. And the other one of importance I showed geometrically was the icosadodeca. And that has a lot to do with Earth grid. So I'll go through this quickly. I talked about the cuboctahedron, these 12 vectors. We saw this shape, and this is thanks to the work of Buckminster Fuller. So under compression, what I didn't show is that when you squeeze this cuboctahedron to a basic shape, it goes right back down, not just to a pyramid, but it goes right back down to a triangle. It goes right down to a triangle or a tetrahedron. I can make the tetrahedron by compressing the shape that you see on the screen. Yeah, I'll just finish off with another concept of fractal. There's 5 platonic solids, but there's another set of shapes called the Archimedeans. There's 13 other shapes that have mixed. They're semi-regular, which means when you look at this shape here, there's a triangle and a pentagon. And this shape here, when you take the centers of the triangle and the pentagon, it forms another shape inside of that. And the shape that forms inside of this is another shape that's made up of just diamonds here. And it's a shape, it's made from magnets. Like I can pull this apart and it clicks and goes back together again. So these two shapes are dual. Dual means that they make a copy of themselves. So and this happens to be the Earth grid. This is this is called a rhombic triacontahedron. It's got 30 diamonds based on the golden ratio. So the small axis, if that's 8 units, the longer axis of the diamond is 13. So that ratio of 8 to 13 is what we see like in pine cones. So when we look at a pine cone, we see the ratio of 8 spirals one way, 13 the other. So this is all based on the phi ratio, which means it's a significant shape. But the thing is, when you take the centers of these 30 diamonds, it doesn't make a copy of itself. It makes another shape. So that's kind of like interesting. But that's why the tetrahedron is the most important shape, because it's a copy of itself. If we took another shape, the one that we talked about here, if we took the 14 faces, even though they're mixed, you've got triangles and squares, what's inside of this shape? If Magic Spider went in this shape and joined all the centers, you end up with 12 diamonds. So this is a shape that's got 12 diamonds, so it's a kind of a fractal, but they're not making copies of itself. So this shape that's got of 12 diamonds is not in the golden ratio. It's called rhombic dodeca. And this is the atomic structure of a crystal that we know of as garnet. So this is garnet crystal. And we can do this at depth with all the shapes, but I wanted to keep coming back to the fact that the ultimate research that we should be doing and looking at is the tetrahedron, because it makes a copy of itself inside. Okay, I think I'll stop there. I just wanted to talk about the language of shape and pattern, and perhaps Michael can sort of follow up with that idea. So I'll stop here, and yeah, thank you
so much, Jain. I love those images on your PowerPoint. You know, it reminded me, love to have you comment on this, Michael. You know, Nassim Haramein, the kind of the radical physicist, basically says that the shape of the universe is a fractal, is the torus. And that if you want to understand the cosmic totality, it's not something broken, it's not something fractured. It's interesting that the name they chose for what's whole and what builds by replicating itself is a fractal. It's an interesting choice of words for something that's the opposite of what it connotes. Michael, what's your comment?
You know the famous picture on the Sistine Chapel of the finger of God touching Adam, the spark of life, this transmission of divine energy into materiality. And when you take the proportions of the finger, from the fingertip to the first knuckle, and it doesn't matter how long your fingers are, but if we call that 1, and we measure from the first knuckle to the next knuckle, and that's 1.618 times this, which is the golden ratio. And then we do so again, 1.618, and again, 1.618. So this, and back in again is the golden rectangle or the spiral in straight. So if you see my fingers, you'll see that my fingers are following the path of the golden spiral. So we are in essence fractal, our shape, our form, but not just our physicality, all the different waves of movement from our breath and our heartbeats and the electrical frequencies in the heart, in the brain, the magnetic field created by our thoughts. These are, under certain conditions and in certain states, they become fractal. And when that happens, something very magical occurs. So whoever's listening, I would invite you to just hold up your hand very loosely. It doesn't have to be a tight fist. Just hold your hand in front of you with your index finger relaxed but up. And with your eyes, focus your visual attention on your fingertip. So invite you to do that, whoever's listening. And regardless, don't look at me on the screen now. Look at your own fingertip. And as you do, just allow your sense of appreciation for your materiality, your physicality. Allow yourself to recognize that you're in a body and it's a vehicle and it's moving and it is energized by your attention and of course by the attention of the whole universe. So as you regard the end of your finger, some of you, perhaps all of you, may begin to notice a tingling sensation on your fingertip. And if you're not feeling that, then pretend you're going to feel it. And then your brain is fooled into creating the effect. So if you feel a tingle, then amplify it. You might ask how, but just allow it to grow because your appreciation grows, or your interest, or your enthusiasm, your fascination. Just let that tingle increase. Any of the panel, are you feeling it? Yes. So in this moment, in a breath, just let the tingle extend to all 5 fingers or 4 fingers and a thumb. So you don't have to do this 5 times. You just, in a breath, you get the tingle on all of your fingers. So it's as if you're holding up an invisible apple and you're touching the skin and it's electrifying your fingertips. If you can take these 5 tingle sensations and allow them to coalesce into a single point in the middle. So using your imagination, using your visual focus, and using your enthusiasm, let that tingle sensation come together as a single point of feeling. that's floating a couple of inches above your hand. Can you feel that, anyone? And as you begin to sense and connect with that field, that PowerPoint that you have created, it's another form of PowerPoint. It shouldn't crash on us, hopefully. And in this moment, you might actually begin to feel that you're holding something in your hand, because you're actually creating a little mini gravity field with your focused human attention. And it has a weight to it. And if you place your other hand above this, and you bring them together as if you're squeezing in a small accordion, you'll feel this, you'll feel something. And what you're feeling is this field of attention and intention. And it's a fractal space that your coherence of your mind and your ability to create and your happiness levels has created this little point of feeling. What you do with this is up to you. You can give it to somebody else. You can gift it to your own heart. You can change it. You can expand it. You can contract it. How is this possible? It's possible because of fractality. Because of the waves of attention when focused creatively on something that is life-generating, something that could be potentially beautiful. Those waves self-organize themselves, to use that particular terminology that Jain mentioned. And I think we both got that from our friend Dan Winter, self-similarity. Maybe not, but that's where I would have picked it up first. The waves of attention meet with and dance with the waves of intention, and they come together and we create a field within the field, within the field. And we notice that we can expand that to the size of a football, a beach ball, potentially a planet. Why not? And the only thing differentiating the size is our imagination. That fractality is the wind on which our attention creates. So this little exercise, this little playful game, from what I have read, I don't know how true this is, perhaps some of you might have some thoughts on it. This was like a testing protocol for potential students in the mystery schools. If they were able to create a field of tingle, a field of feeling on the end of their fingertip, it showed that they had mental coherence, physiological order, and an ability to connect the two together, which meant that they had an increased opportunity to learn effectively, coherently, and take responsibility for the knowledge that they were going to learn. So it was like a test. I can tell you it's a test now after we've done it, so you don't feel stressed. So the fractality is a very real event on an ongoing basis in terms of our existence. It is the essence of a heart in compassion, because in a moment of connection with another, or an empathic encounter with another living being, it could be a tree, it could be a butterfly, of course with another person, this feeling of connection initiates a softening of the muscles of the heart into a natural rhythm, which both creates and resonates with and is a product of a fractal pattern of electrical fields within which the heart is able to resonate, resound with, and effectively create the torus that you spoke about, Jim, this field effect around the physical body, which has a centering force of pure compassion, which is the fractal field of love itself. And in these moments, our heart is able to turn inside out. The electrical field becomes immediately connected with everything else. And fractality means nothing if it doesn't mean connectivity. So our ability to connect with and appreciate the beauty of a space, Chartres Cathedral, or your bedroom, or even just something holding in your hand, this ability to connect is a fractal event. It's a fractal experience that literally allows us to appreciate any scale. So we can inhabit the entire universe with only a thought. We can touch the universe with a gentle connection. And fractality is the vehicle and the mechanism and the potential of life itself. You can tell I'm enthusiastic about the subject, you know. Hopefully that gives you another sense of it.
Wow, Michael, thank you so much. To think of the fractality of the body, and the fractality of emotions is an awesome thing. So thank you for that. I'm going to turn to Kalen to see what his comment is on these matters. Kalen?
The way I'm working with fractality right now is using mirror symmetry, which is trying to mirror the algebraic geometry and the symplectic geometry. And you can do that by fractalizing a torus and reducing it to torus fibers and then reassembling it so you can actually get one form to become the other form. And that's sort of how I'm trying to work with the geometry of memory. That I'm trying to go from what people normally think of as just rigid memories and this is what I have. And if that can be reassembled by fractalizing a sphere, you could actually stretch that where you can get to the memories from the beginning to the end of time, and you can go into the future and pull your memories back. And it's the basic concept is to try to use mirror symmetry to put those two different geometries together.
So if I'm understanding what everybody's saying here, fractals construct just about everything. I mean, if Nassim Haramein is correct that the entire cosmos is a torus-shaped fractal, and fractals are sort of geometry that spirals, as Jain was just saying, and that they're in our hearts, in our hands, in our emotions, as Michael is saying. Would it be fair to say that fractals are essential to the construction of all that is in the visible and invisible worlds? Jain, what would you say about that? I mean, I want to turn to other people, but would that be a kind of, and Michael, is that a fair understanding of fractals?
Yeah, I was just while you're saying that, I was thinking about what you originally said in your introduction. You said that the etymology, the original meaning of the word fractal means a fraction, and we've just, after hearing Michael's discussion and mine, we know that fractal is exactly the opposite of whatever a fraction means. It's not fractionation. It would be more about wholeness or self-similarity. And yes, I just thought, just while you were talking, Jim, I missed exactly what you're saying, because I was musing, thinking, geez, we need a new word for fractal if the root means it's fraction. This is where we have to change that. So maybe someone listening could come up with a better word. But yeah, so you inspired me. I was musing. So I actually forgot the question that you were.
Can I ask something?
Sure.
Wouldn't it mean that the fraction just reflects the wholeness? I mean, maybe it's not really that we're cutting something down, but that we're just coming into the detail of what it is really representing, like what Kalen was saying, that it is a mirror. So,
yep.
So a fractal is the micro of something bigger. Could you think of it like that?
Yeah, that the way you just said that invites the concept of the macro and the micro. But according to some other sacred geometry teachers I've met from New Zealand and other friends, they're saying that fractal can only relate to the golden ratio, because if you use any other fractions like a half or a third or 3/4, or if you don't use the fraction, even though it's not a fraction, but if you don't use this ratio called 1.618, the wavelengths destroy each other. They can't carry on from the micro to the macro. They crash. So the ultimate fractal, the ultimate ratio is 1.618. So what Michael was saying was that it's what's important here is the ratio. It's not the size. Size, Michael was saying, size is irrelevant. It doesn't matter whether it's in the small picture or the large picture. What needs to be carried through is the correct proportion. And that's what we're going to look at, that the ultimate sine wave is the 0.618 ratio. So, but is 0.618 a ratio, a fraction? I'm not sure. We can't actually, this thing called phi ratio is not even a number. That's the mystery here. We can't put it in terms of a fraction like it's 1.5 or 1.6. It's 1.618033988 forever. So we can't even express it in our decimal system. So this is part of the mystery, that the ultimate ratio is not even a number that we can define in terms of fractions. So I don't even know what the answer is to that, but that's where I'm at. And it keeps you sort of scratching your head and wondering, well, how do we define this infinity? But you're on the right path, and thinking in terms of fraction.
Well, let me turn it back to you, Banafsheh, and then I want to hear from you, Ruth, on the music. I mean, Banafsheh, you teach dance, and you're an exquisite artistic dancer. Do you feel fractals in the dance?
Well, in relation to music, for sure. Just going back to how Jain and Michael were illuminating the idea of what a fractal is, definitely in the resonance between the dance and the music, I feel there's that connection and that creation of fractality that Michael was especially opening up for us. So yes, definitely. And then the whirling for definitely has that, the spiraling that, and I've shared with Jain before how the whirling feels like it feels toroidal in many ways. So definitely, especially in relation to music, I feel we can experience fractality through dance.
Ruth, you play about a dozen instruments. You must have some deep sense of the fractality of music. It must be just embedded in refined music, right?
Well, I don't know. I really connected with what Michael was saying, in that, you know, when you perform, it's like you feel that connection with the people, with what's going on, and that I loved thinking of it that way, as a way of connecting and mirroring, and it's really, my mind is still working on it. But yeah, when I play, I'm definitely, you know, aware of the different connections and the different sounds and how they're affecting my body and how they're moving out and affecting other people.
Yeah. Well, you have any comment, Michael, on that?
Certainly. Speaking from an architectural point of view, literally, not metaphorically, when I design and construct buildings, I would use fractality. And quite specifically, if there was some play with the actual dimensionality of the building in terms of its size, if there was a little bit of movement in this direction, I would seek to make the floor plan and the volume geometries fractal, of course. And in doing so, I've noticed, as have my clients and the inhabitants of these spaces, certain characteristics, that there is a focusing of attention that is possible. That there is, it could be that the actual wall positions from left to right, ground to ceiling, the window position, and the actual breakup of the window itself, it invites attention visually, as like a gestalt psychology that we observe, we perceive, and we assess. And that assessment is taken in by our senses, and it's qualified and it's explored by the brain. And if the proportions are fractal, the brain enjoys the process more than it would otherwise. And there is a release of various serotonin and other hormones that make you feel good. You become more relaxed. And in that moment, you can expand your sense of self to include the space. So fractality in this case has a practical application. However, well, maybe not however, but and is perhaps a better word than however. And it has the effect of seeking truth. That beauty has a way of wishing to establish truth, a truth that isn't based on opinion. So that anything in the space that's not in truth, be it a psychological fear, be it some relationship issue, or even some telluric or some ground energy or geopathic something, is going to be challenged. It's going to be forced into some sort of an energetic reaction. So fractality in this case can initiate an energetic response when the space is quite static. When we add ourselves into that equation, we have a heightened experience, and that experience can be challenging. It can be very illuminating. It can be very inspiring, but it has an effect. And of course, we are used to seeing fractality like in Chartres Cathedral. And not many of us would have had an opportunity to extend their field into a fractal at a more human level, by way of an ordinary building, an ordinary space where you live, where you work, how you transport yourself, and so on. So fractality, understandably, is not really being perceived at a human level. We can perceive it as a mental construct, as a series of ideas and models and formula. But in terms of an everyday experience, we don't get much opportunity to engage in a meaningful way with what fractality means. Yet, every breath we take, every thought we have, every feeling and emotion and perception is part of the fractal field. So this is the beautiful paradox, that if we seek to understand fractals purely from the mind, we're not actually getting it. Yet the mind itself is a fractal field exploring itself fractally. And so that's why I like to take these into an experiential state. Of course, knowing and understanding is a key element and very important, because it can relax the mind. If you understand something, at least to a certain level, your mind relaxes enough to be able to feel the effects. And that's the bit that interests me. So I would utilize it in the architecture, utilize it in ritual, but of course in everyday connection, because our ability to empathically connect with another is a fractal event. And I just go back to that because that's the key. Dan Winter has a beautiful expression, one of many that he has coined over the years, that magnetism is the wind rather, on which love travels. And magnetic fields that are able to travel and propagate and expand themselves fractally allow love, the smallest sense of love, to expand and include an entire ecosystem. And similarly, our ability to feel the ecosystem and love it is the same fractality, but the other end. And this is very beautiful. And so certainly in July, we will be exploring this through everything from breath work to some physical movement to connections with other people. And I would very much wish to explore that when we're there.
Well, I think this is the point, Karen, where we need to turn to you, because as we know, this is why we're in Chartres, right?
That's it.
Precisely because of what Michael just said, that there's an effect of fractal architecture, as the ancients noted, as Plato noted, that literally raise your soul.
I wanted to add
higher frequency and alignment. And I know that's a point at which you've pondered deeply, Karen. So I'd love to have your comment at this point.
I just wanted to, can I just add one thing?
Oh, yes. Yeah, please.
Just the idea of bringing sound into that fractal environment. I mean, I've certainly experienced, you sing in a cotton box room, it's tough, but when you open your mouth in a cathedral and sing, it's a very different experience and brings a very, I think that's where that fractal thing is happening in there, and the love also. I mean, because if you sing in one of those places, as so amazing, we've all sung there, it definitely works on your body and in the transmission of it anyway. Yeah.
And for those of you who haven't had the experience yet, Ruth playing in the cathedral is something to behold, something to experience. So we're looking forward to having you again with us this next time, Ruth. Thank you. So Karen, what would be your comment? We're getting close to the end here, but would love to have your comment on these matters.
Well, I'm very excited both about what Jane was saying and also what Michael was saying. And I have a comment for each of them. So I'm going to start with Jane. When you showed the form that had 30 sides with diamonds on each side, is it true that each of the diamonds are not exactly the same size and that's why it's not a platonic solid?
This shape here that you're referring to, they're all exactly, each diamond is exactly the same as the other. But this
They
is not
just
a platonic
freeze?
solid.
Then why is it not a platonic solid?
Because this one's called a Catalan Solid, because before, to get this shape, I had to go, I got this from going to the midpoints of all these pentagons and triangles that you see. This shape is, if you get two shapes called the icosa and the dodeca, imagine in my hand, I had the dodeca and the icosa. Imagine these are the same size. There's another thing that we could call it fusion. If these were both inside the same sphere and I merged them into each other, we end up with something that suddenly has triangles and pentagons. And this is called icosidodeca, but it belongs to a family called the Archimedeans. Archimedean means they're semi-regular. So if you look at a
I understand all of that, Jane.
Yeah.
Jane,
Okay,
you already explained all of that, and I understand that, but you're not answering my question.
Okay.
So the question has to do with why isn't this 30-sided diamond-formed form a platonic solid?
I have a thought. I don't know the answer. Yeah, that one of the, as I understand it, one of the characteristics of the 5 platonic solids is that if they're placed inside a sphere, each of the vertices or outer points will touch the inside of a sphere.
Yes.
It may be that the shape that Jane is holding doesn't do that.
Yeah. That's right. That's correct. It doesn't do that. Yes, it's close to being inside of a sphere. But the reason why we're interested in this shape is that the radius of this shape, where it touches the sphere, is in a harmonic golden ratio to the edge length. So if this edge length here was 8 units at length, then the radius of this sphere is 13. So this is one of the special qualities of this earth grid shape, is that it's in the golden ratio. And it's actually one of my most favorite shapes, because the other diamond, which you get from the other diamond, the ratio, if this is 8, if this is 1, this is 1.4. It's not the gold, it's not, we want 1 is to 1.618, the golden diamond. So this is a root 2 diamond, whereas this is the shape that I've been very interested in for 30 years. And no one's talking about this shape. Everyone's talking about the macabre star tetrahedron. Like everyone's talking about this shape, which is cubic. We're still in root 2, but in 10 years' time, we're going to shift from the cube to a golden ratio form. So, yeah.
Good. I think Michael answered my question. I think Michael answered my question that all of the vertices wouldn't touch the edge of a sphere if it was inside. That was my question. Right. And we're almost out of time. So I did want to make a point to Michael. So when you were describing the connectivity between human beings in relation to fractality and its relationship to love, what came up for me was prayer, and how people can pray in one place on the planet and it can affect people on a far distant place on the planet. And I'm wondering if the transmission of the energy of prayer has something to do with fractality.
Okay, I think I'm unmuted. I think I am. Okay. Some year ago, 20-30 years ago, those alpha agencies, they had their own protocol called View. Others would refer similar to shamanic journeying. And the key component of this is that the practitioner would be able to remotely view another place. So within the context of what you just said, Karen, you can view a place or you can connect with it. It's the same thing. If you're viewing it, you're perceiving it. What one of the practitioners began to hypothesize was that it's not that his mind went there or his intention went there. It's that the field is fractal, so the small part knows all of the rest. So there's no mind traveling 4,000 color point and getting images. What's happening is that to the extent that we're able to open that part that's already in us, that's described and compiled 4,000 miles away, that's known to us. So our brain, somewhere within the electrical universe of our brain, we create a map or a map of the location, and then we can explore it locally. So if you have a singular or en masse, what you've got is a group tension that has the same shape. And that shape, if targeted on an object, on a situation, on another group of people, whatever the reason and source of this, and the tension, and the holding of a truth can allow the recipient to begin to resonate with this truth and take the shape of it, sharing of the shape. And if a group of people hold a particular shape without fear, without exercising it like, oh, please God, do this for me. This is our responsibility to be able to hold a coherent thought and a vision and a dream and a hope and a feeling. And if we do it together, it's even more powerful. And the prayer, which is a field effect, a fractal field, is felt by the recipient. And they then get a choice in with that pattern if it suits their evolution, and they can change their entire reality in a breath. So absolutely, prayer is a fractal event.
Thank you. It's a beautiful way to integrate science and spirituality. So I'm really looking forward to our time together and all the things that we're going to be exploring and experiencing. So thank you very much, both Michael and Jane.
Our time is up, so I'll turn it over to Banafsheh for a final benediction. Banafsheh.
And thank you, everyone, for being with us.
Yes, thank you, everyone. As we bring our fascinating exploration to a close, let's remember that our coming together has been in the remembrance and adoration of the Holy Mother and the great mystery. And may each and every one of us contribute fractally to the ever-expanding field of love. Thank you so much, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
We'll see you next month for a conversation with Peggy, Ruben, and Andrew Harvey.
On May 17th.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.